Have you ever wondered how two countries that once worked closely together became rivals? Their decisions can now affect the stability of an entire region and at times even the global economy. When people talk about the relationship between Iran and the United States today, it usually sounds like it has always been hostile, but if you rewind the clock far enough, that's not how it began. In fact, Iran and the United States were strategic partners during one of the most tense periods of the 20th century. The real story of how that relationship changed is not about religion or cultural clashes, it's about power, influence, resources, and a long chain of decisions made by leaders on both sides over more than 70 years. To understand where the tension really began, you have to go back to the early 1950s. The world was deep inside the Cold War. Iran sat in one of the most strategically important locations on the map. It bordered areas under Soviet influence. At the same time, it controlled enormous oil reserves that powered industries worldwide. For Washington, Iran wasn't just another country in the Middle East. It was a strategic partner that could help contain Soviet influence in the region. At that time, Iran was ruled by Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi. However, the political system also had an elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh. Mossadegh made a decision that seemed simple on the surface but would eventually reshape the country's future. He nationalized Iran's oil industry, removing control from foreign companies that had dominated the sector for decades. Inside Iran, many people celebrated it as a moment of national independence. In Washington and London, the decision created serious concern. In the middle of the Cold War, losing influence in such an important country felt like a strategic risk. Then, in 1953, something happened that would leave a long shadow over the relationship. The 1953 Iranian Coup. With support from Western intelligence operations, Mossadegh was removed from power. The Shah then strengthened his control over the country. In Washington, the move was viewed as a way to maintain stability and prevent chaos in a fragile region. But inside Iran, many people saw it very differently. They saw it as outside powers interfering in their political future. Even though the alliance between Iran and the United States continued afterward, that moment quietly planted seeds of distrust that would grow over time. For the next 2 decades, Iran remained one of Washington's closest allies in the Middle East. The Shah pushed for rapid modernization. New infrastructure projects appeared across the country. The military expanded, cities grew, and Iran began presenting itself as a rising regional power. But not everyone felt the same sense of opportunity. Some groups felt politically marginalized. Others felt the economic benefits were unevenly distributed. Gradually, dissatisfaction began spreading through parts of Iranian society. Then came 1979, and everything changed faster than almost anyone expected. Massive protests and political upheaval led to the collapse of the monarchy during the Iranian Revolution. A completely new political system emerged under the leadership of Ruhollah Khomeini. For Washington, the transformation was a major geopolitical shock because a longtime strategic ally had suddenly become a government deeply suspicious of Western influence. Only months later, another event pushed the relationship into a crisis, the Iran hostage crisis. American diplomats were taken hostage inside the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and held for more than 400 days. For the United States, images of the crisis dominated television news. It created a national sense of anger and humiliation. For many inside Iran, the moment was framed very differently. They saw it as a rejection of decades of political pressure from outside powers. Whatever the perspective, the result was clear. Trust between the two governments collapsed almost overnight. The 1980s brought another major turning point, the devastating Iran-Iraq War. It became one of the longest and most destructive conflicts of the late 20th century. During parts of the war, the United States supported Iraq strategically in order to contain Iran's influence in the region, while Iran interpreted Western involvement as further evidence that powerful countries were determined to isolate it. Despite decades of hostility, Iran and the US have never fought a direct war. Instead, their relationship became a mix of economic pressure, sanctions, diplomacy, and strategic competition. In the early 21st century, a new issue pushed tensions back into global headlines: Iran's nuclear program. Washington and several allies feared that nuclear technology could eventually give Iran the ability to develop nuclear weapons. Iran insisted its program was intended for energy production and scientific development. Years of international negotiations followed. Eventually, an agreement known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was reached during the presidency of Barack Obama. For a brief moment, it seemed decades of confrontation might slowly shift toward cautious diplomacy, but global politics rarely moves in straight lines. In 2018, the United States, under Donald Trump, withdrew from the agreement, arguing that the deal did not sufficiently limit Iran's long-term strategic capabilities. Iran responded by gradually reducing its own commitments to the agreement, and tensions rose again. Military incidents in the Persian Gulf, economic sanctions, cyber operations, and regional power competition created moments when analysts feared a direct confrontation might finally occur, yet it never did, raising one of the most interesting questions in modern geopolitics. After decades of tension, why has direct war between Iran and the United States not occurred? Strategic calculation may be the answer. Iran recognizes America's military reach. Washington knows war with Iran could destabilize the region and global markets, so the rivalry persists not as war, but as a complex chess match defined by diplomatic and strategic moves. Now, I want to ask you something. After 70 years, do you think Iran and the United States could move toward cooperation, or will competition keep them locked in tension? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious to hear different perspectives. If you enjoy deep historic stories about the forces shaping today's world, subscribe and turn on notifications. The next story may reveal another moment where a key decision changed global politics.